My mother-in-law gave a dramatic sweep of her hands and burst out laughing when I asked whether I would be making the New Year's lunch. Certainly not. That isn't feasible. My daughter-in-law is not a good chef, she cried out. Claiming to be the one in charge of the kitchen, she labeled me the hopeless housewife who couldn't even pull off a New Year's feast. Her laughter was insulting in the extreme rather than just annoying. I knew that it was time for me to speak up after putting up with this for so long. Natalie is my name. I got married last year and I'm 29 years old. I love to cook because I'm a full-time homemaker, and fortunately, my husband isn't too particular. For him, everything tasty seems to work. We live in a gorgeous, recently remodeled house with an amazing kitchen featuring a sizable island, and he is a kind man. My mother-in-law has been a persistent problem, even though it should have been a perfect setup from the beginning. She considers me to be a complete flop in the kitchen and takes great pride in her culinary abilities. Even worse, she broadcasts her views rather than keeping them to herself. She was loudly chatting with a neighbor's wife just the other day, making sure her voice could be heard while I was outside doing laundry. Even my daughter-in-law struggles with cooking. It's terrible. I'm curious about her childhood. She bemoaned, "My poor son, so unfortunate to be stuck with her," her words piercing me like sharp needles. Taking her criticism of my cuisine was difficult enough, but hearing her disparage my family was just unbearable. I came to the realization that I had to stop this now. Time to make a decision. I have always had the utmost respect for my parents and have treasured the many things they have taught me. Regretfully, my mother-in-law never made the effort to comprehend or value these principles. Rather, she decided to routinely make fun of me. It was simply another one of her constant criticisms, and today was no different. Her scathing comments reverberated throughout the neighborhood. She's not even familiar with correct seasoning. There is almost no flavor if I don't cook. Why was my son forced to wed someone who resembled her? The neighbors added their insults, stoking the conflagration by implying that my husband Daniel had taken on more than he could handle and wondering why she hadn't taught me herself. I wish they would all just quit, under my breath. I squeezed a glass so hard that it broke in my hand. I saw my opportunity to finally let everything out when my husband Daniel returned home that evening and my mother-in-law was conveniently taking a shower. "Is there nothing you can do for your mother?" I begged Daniel as I took his jacket. "She's going around the neighborhood every day, making me out to be some hopeless cook." It felt right to speak up about my mother-in-law's unforgiving actions. Since Daniel actually cares about me and we don't have a tight relationship, I expected his support, possibly even expecting him to defend me or at the very least notice the stress her words were causing me. But I wasn't prepared for his reaction. "Well, Mom has always been very particular about cooking," he replied, appearing sincere to be distressed as he scratched his head. Particular hovered in the air, a word so light for an accusation so terrible. I was ready to respond with something about how overly seasoning she was, but I refrained and instead just stared at him in shock, wondering if he really realized how much his mother had said. I looked at Daniel, completely taken aback. He said casually, "Come on, she's a good cook, right?" Well, I'm not really knowledgeable about good or bad cooking. Just try to get along with Mom, please. Isn't that what a wife is meant to accomplish? I was startled when he exited the room after saying those things. Was this a joke of any kind? My head kept repeating, "A good cook, a wife's duty." Even so, what does that mean? Suddenly, I felt a rush of frustration course through me. I detest it, but my mother-in-law's food is not at all enjoyable. For the past year, she has taken over the kitchen, purportedly to save me work, but I have never really liked the food she makes. She is adamant that adding more spices does not necessarily translate into superior flavor. Raised on such strong taste, Daniel never complains when he finishes his plate. But I fight with it every day. In addition to being unpleasant, I worry that eating meals with such a high spice content may be damaging to my palate and bad for my health. Every mealtime has turned into a silent struggle in which I must complete my plate for fear of what might happen if I leave any behind. I sighed deeply, alone in our bedroom silence. The shocking thing was that Daniel didn't seem to care about how his mother cooked, rather than the fact that he didn't criticize his mother's method. I found myself craving the cozy, traditional dinners my folks used to provide at times like this. The excitement for the New Year's festivities grew as the year's end drew near. This would be my first New Year's since I married into this family, when we usually celebrate with a big party and a feast that my mother-in-law makes. I was filled with a feeling of dread rather than excitement as I considered how I would handle the overwhelming flavors and familial expectations that had become a regular part of my life. When Daniel casually mentioned that it was customary for the family to gather and enjoy the feast prepared by his mother for New Year's, I couldn't help but silently question the tradition. However, outwardly I only managed a no. It seemed that the relatives who eagerly attended each year had grown to love her cooking, or perhaps they had simply become accustomed to it. Despite feeling a bit of sympathy for them, I couldn't shake off the feeling of slight dread. Despite the frequent critiques from my mother-in-law about my supposedly bland culinary skills, my parents instilled a strong confidence in my cooking abilities. I secretly longed to cook for everyone and maybe even introduce some subtle flavors to Daniel's palate. With a newfound resolve, I decided it was time to discuss the New Year's feast with my mother-in-law. As she bustled around the kitchen, pulling out large plates and pots, I seized the moment. "I'd like to help with the New Year's feast," I ventured as she energetically prepared for the upcoming celebration. Turning to face me, her expression was one of immediate dismissal. "Natalie, you can't even cook properly. How can you prepare food for the New Year's celebration? We'll have not just our family, but all the relatives over. You know that, right?" she retorted. "But I'm part of this family now. It's my duty as a wife to contribute," I argued, my voice tinged with desperation. She simply shook her head. "Do you want to create an awkward atmosphere at the start of the new year? Everyone comes expecting my cooking. We can't disappoint them. Please, if you understand, don't interfere." Frustration bubbled inside me as I watched her turn back to her preparations, effectively shutting down my offer to help. The new year arrived, and with it, the house filled with about 20 relatives, more than I had anticipated, many of whom I hadn't seen since the wedding. As each guest arrived, I greeted them warmly, ushering them into the spacious dining room that had once awed me when I first moved in. The unusually large room was buzzing, perfectly suited for such gatherings. Meanwhile, my mother-in-law was already deep in conversation with the arriving relatives, the center of attention in the kitchen and the heart of the celebration. During the festive preparations, a relative curiously inquired, "By the way, is Natalie preparing the feast this year?" My mother-in-law quickly waved her hands dismissively and laughed. "That's impossible. My daughter-in-law can't cook at all. She's a hopeless housewife who can't even manage a New Year's feast. I handle all the cooking around here," she declared, her laughter sounding harsh and unwelcoming. It was not a joke or a casual remark. It was a pointed insult directed at me. At that moment, I reached my breaking point. "Mother-in-law, please let me prepare the New Year's feast this time. If it doesn't turn out well, you can always make a palate-cleansing dish," I suggested, breaking the tense silence that ensued. After a brief pause, the room began to buzz with whispers from the relatives. "Well, I certainly don't want a disappointing meal, but they say practice makes perfect, right? My mother-in-law reluctantly conceded, sensing the shifting tide of opinion among the relatives in favor of giving me a chance. All right, fine. If it doesn't work out, Frida can step in, she added. Very well then, Nat, you can take the reins this year, she stated, her words tinged with reluctance. But remember, I can always step in. Ladies and gentlemen, indulge this hopeless housewife's whims for once, she announced with a tone of patronization. With my heart swelling with pride and determination, I was ready to showcase my cooking skills to everyone. It was my chance to change everyone's perceptions. I poured my heart into preparing the meal, and as the beautifully arranged feast was laid on the large platter, exclamations of admiration filled the room from our relatives. Wow, the meal turned out perfectly. It looks delicious. Well done, Natalie. This isn't something just anyone could pull off. They praised enthusiastically. Amidst such acclaim, my mother-in-law, who had just returned from shopping for the so-called palate-cleansing dish, glanced at my spread. It looks all right, I suppose, but it's probably bland, she remarked, emphasizing the word probably and clearly reluctant to acknowledge the success. Ignoring her comments, I busied myself distributing paper plates and forks to the relatives, encouraging them to enjoy the meal. As my mother-in-law hurried into the kitchen to start on what she called the palate-cleansing dish, she kept a watchful eye over us, probably expecting her to intervene. The relatives tentatively began sampling the dishes I had prepared, and a murmur of approval started to build. My mother-in-law, not missing a beat, chuckled with apparent satisfaction, announcing loudly, "See, I told you. This is why she's the incompetent daughter-in-law, everyone. You don't need to force yourselves. I'll prepare the palate-cleansing dish right away." Her tone carried a triumphant note, expecting to salvage what she assumed would be a culinary disaster. However, her satisfaction was quickly overshadowed by sounds of genuine delight from the dining room. This is the first time I've tasted this delicious New Year's food. It's like something from a fancy hotel. Natalie, where did you learn to cook like this? Exclaimed one of the relatives, their praise filling the room with energy. Amidst the lively crowd, my mother-in-law stood momentarily stunned into silence by the unexpected approval. With everyone's attention now on me and none on her, I felt a surge of confidence and decided it was the perfect moment to reveal my background. I grew up in a family deeply passionate about food. My family owns a renowned French restaurant celebrated for its authentic cuisine and even recognized in the Michelin Guide. My father is the 5th generation overseeing culinary operations, and my mother, from a long lineage of chefs, supports him wholeheartedly. From a young age, I absorbed the art of cooking by observing my parents. By the time I was in upper elementary school, I was earnestly learning from them. Though my brother is poised to inherit the restaurant, the culinary knowledge passed down from my parents remains a deep source of pride within me. This revelation shifted the atmosphere, further cementing my newfound respect among the relatives, and leaving my mother-in-law to ponder the unexpected turn of events. As the room buzzed with impressed relatives, I felt a profound connection to my heritage, proud to finally share my true culinary roots. That's why I found it impossible to tolerate my mother-in-law's dismissive remarks and actions that seemed to undermine my culinary skills. To her, dismissing my cooking was akin to denying my parents' legacy and the restaurant that had been a cornerstone of our family for generations. I had mentioned this before I got married, but it seemed lost on her. My mother-in-law, often condescending, seemed to see me merely as the daughter from a quaint countryside restaurant. Daniel, largely indifferent to culinary nuances, probably couldn't tell the difference between a family-run establishment and authentic French cuisine. I sometimes found myself questioning why I married into this family. a thought that I muttered under my breath as I turned to the sound of someone calling my name, meeting the gaze of several pairs of expectant eyes. We have seconds. I want more too. Despite the generous portions I had prepared, everything had been completely devoured. A wave of happiness washed over me, and I felt tears welling up. Receiving praise for my cooking should have been routine, something I had known before getting married. Yet over the past year, I seem to have forgotten that sensation entirely. Yes, I'll prepare more right away, I declared with renewed determination as I hurried out of the room. I passed by my motionless mother-in-law. She had, after all, brought some ingredients regardless of her earlier criticisms. "Mother-in-law, I'll use these ingredients, okay?" I announced but received no reply. The groceries remained untouched in the kitchen. As I reached to inspect the contents of the supermarket bag, someone entered the kitchen. Could you teach us how to cook too?" I glanced up to find 4 women lined up before me, their ages ranging from around mine to about that of my mother-in-law's. This unexpected request bolstered my confidence further. Here was an opportunity not just to share my heritage, but also to foster a bond over the love of cooking, transcending generational and family boundaries. It was a moment of validation and a chance to demonstrate the depth of my skills and the rich culinary legacy I carried. As I looked into their eyes, each gleamed with the same eager curiosity. "The food was amazing. We'd love to learn from you." They were enthused. Hearing those words ignited something within me. I had never considered teaching cooking before, but witnessing their admiration and realizing the impact I could make, a newfound desire to share my knowledge welled up inside me. With a smile, I gladly agreed to teach them, and the room erupted with excitement. The group got into a lively conversation about how they would improve as cooks and wow their spouses. And thus an unplanned culinary class started. My mother-in-law stood back and observed us closely, her countenance blank as she cleaned up quietly. The meals were greeted with a round of applause as we wrapped up the class. I have to say that sometimes I find Grace's food to be a little too salty. On the other hand, Natalie's food is elegant and delicate, truly expert French cuisine. One of the participants, Jennifer, grinned broadly at being acknowledged by everyone. I smiled a little, embarrassed and proud at the same time, but my mother-in-law didn't seem to be taking the constant compliments to heart. Daniel interrupted me as I was thinking of ways to diffuse the situation. "I really like Natalie's food more. I have always been concerned about salt and health because of Mom's strong flavorings. Natalie should take care of the cooking on a regular basis from now on." My mother-in-law appeared to be absolutely taken aback by such remarks, and soon after, she retreated silently to her bed. When my family members learned that I was a skilled cook, their perception of me and my role in the family drastically changed. This unanticipated development not only gave me more confidence, but it also quietly changed the dynamics of the household in a way I had not imagined. My culinary prowess quickly gained recognition, and I started getting requests to instruct cooking classes. I was apprehensive at first, but then I remembered how much fun the spontaneous cooking session had been, so I decided to seize the chance. People actually appreciated my abilities, and word of mouth rapidly expanded my reputation as a talented cook of traditional French cuisine. Before I knew it, I was praised as a homemaker who was well known for her food and had been highlighted in the media. I began receiving requests for my classes from people across the nation. I discovered that life is incredibly unexpected. This strange trip even resulted in a profile of me in a well-known culinary publication. I discussed my father's influence on my culinary talents and my culinary background in the post. After the change in family and public attitude, my mother-in-law, who had previously disseminated unflattering rumors about my cooking prowess, stopped making any comments on food-related topics. She eventually quit cooking completely over time, so I'm now alone in charge of preparing meals for our family. We live together peacefully now, which is a big difference from when we first started dating, despite the increasing business.